I let it click every now and then. If it clicks every now and then it's set right.
Yeah, very good point. The other part to that as well is speed. And when your speed has all of a sudden changed, you start to hear the clicking sound because it's sped up, right? So you know, that audible. Keep your clickers on, guys. On anything, keep all your clickers on. You know, I hear these silly things that you got to turn your clickers off to save them. I don't buy into that. I've ran reels for 10, 15 years, and they get a lot of hours, and those clickers haven't worn out on me. Any other questions on divers? All right, let's move on. So lead core and copper, let's do both of them at the same time because there's a bit of confusion. Often when we talk about lead core and copper, it's about long lines, sometimes called junk lines. And it's about getting lines away from the boat, okay? But the line itself is that sinking capability. So the more line you have out, the greater the depth in general. And what I mean by that is the faster the boat goes, the less depth you're going to achieve. So it's not a set science. You're not going to say every time that you let out a 10 color lead core, it's going to get to 47 feet and stay there. It's not. It's going to be undulating in depths as you're trolling. The speed will change. How the line flows through the water will be completely different as you're trolling. So lead core itself has that very interesting action that it imparts on a lot of baits. And it's very, very good at catching fish because of it. You know, it has that sweeping kind of, if you can imagine it like this, as the boat is going. Sometimes it's an excellent way of getting fish in rougher water conditions, or when you have that roll to the lake, right? That lead core, for some reason, really does well for me on those conditions. Yeah, so lead core, the longer the length you go, is the deeper that it'll go. It typically maxes out based on, you know, typical trolling speed for salmon. Will max out at about 48 on a 10 color lead. Okay. When you pump that speed up, you'll get it up as high as 40 feet. You know, when you're going almost 3 miles an hour, 2.8. So you know your lead core line, although you pull, you know, maybe you have a reel that's 10 colors of lead core, you'll want to use all of it in the water. So a lot of people have asked, well, I fill up a 10 color lead core, can I just let out 3 and fish shallow? It's not recommended. Number one, it's not good for the lead core itself. To have that line in the rod guides, and then just imagine the lead wire inside. Lead is not strong in itself, so it'll crack and it'll break, and when it does, it'll come through that cloth sheathing that is surrounding that lead, and it ruins your lead core. So generally we run the full length all the way out till you get into your backing line. So what's between the lead core and what's remaining on the reel is often going to be braided line. Usually 50-pound test braided line will give you a thickness that is good in the reel, and it won't wrap up underneath itself at the end of the arbors of the spool. So you have a thick enough line that it'll lay nice on your reel and be very smooth when it comes off the reel. It won't bind into the sides of the spool. So your lead core line and that backing is really where you're going to let out till all of the lead is in the water. We call it not to the water, right? Where you see the backing line goes to the surface of the water behind the boat. That's the distance. So then you're consistently doing the same thing with that lead core stretch. Now, you may want to expand your inventory and add more reels with different lengths of line. So let's say, for an example, your next lead core reel will be a 5-color lead core. Okay, so now what you could do is add a little bit of lead into the backing and be able to send that out even further, and it'll run the same depth as a 10 color lead core. But you only use, you have 2 reels, one's a 10, one's a 5, with a little bit of a snap weight that gets it down into that depth as well. So you can start to add to your arsenal and be able to do very similar things.
Now, when you do that, you add the weight to it. Do you add it to the braid or do you add it to the leader?
I do the braid. I usually go on the backing side, and some people do it on the leader side as well. I don't. I like the action of lead core. That is the reason why I like it to be left alone. So if you got that lead core down there and it's kind of doing its thing, you put the snap weight on and it sends that down, but it's still doing its thing, right, at a deeper depth. So the lead core is still giving you that. Now the difference between lead core,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Now, if you're adding the extra weight on, how much line would you have out? Because you're saying
Yeah.
you want the lead
Yeah.
right at the water
Right.
to the braid. But now
Yeah.
you're adding the weight. How much more line would you add?
Yeah, so generally I'd put the weight just above the backing knot, maybe about 3 or 4 feet, just enough so you can get it out, and then the guy's going to wind it into the rod guide and start getting it in. So that generally it depends on the weight, the amount of weight we're using, and how much line we want to let out. Perfect example, if I was to do a 5 color lead core and I want to match it to the same depth, ballparking, I would probably run a 4 ounce and run it back another 30 feet. Okay, and it would roughly track similar to that of a full color, a full 10 color.
Each ounce of lead, rule of thumb, again, like Shane said, there's so many variables with current, speed, but you're basically adding 4 feet per ounce. So, like Shane said, he's gonna add another, 4 or 5 ounces of lead. That's all, like add another 4 or 5 colors of core. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
How many ounces in a color? What's a color of lead weight? An ounce?
I don't know, that's a good question.
Yeah, I think a full 10 colors is like 11 ounces.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Give or take an ounce, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's there's different weights of lead core too. So 27-pound test. So when we talk about lead core, generally for salmon fishing, it's 27-pound test. You can get 45, or you can go down to 18. 18 is more what the walleye guys do in shallower water. So 27 is generally what we mean by lead core. Yeah, yes.
What's the average life of lead core? When would you
Yeah.
replace it?
Yeah, so you're going to start to see the lead core itself, it'll lose its color. You'll start to see it fade. And over time, that's probably a good sign. You'll start to see it fuzzy too. And if you have any lead chunks that are coming through the sheathing, it's time to replace it. You're probably...
Usually when it breaks off.
All right, well, so that's kind of lead core in its nutshell, but why is it that we want to run copper line? And so copper and lead core, they work on the same premise. The line itself is a sinking device, but they are slightly different. So generally, when it comes to lead core line, I focus on anything that's above 45 feet is going to be lead core. I know guys will run short coppers and get the same kind of depth. I totally get it. But I just have the arsenal of lead core, so I use it. But if I'm getting deeper than that, if I want to get 50 feet deep or deeper, all the way down to 100, then we're talking about copper line. For me, it's copper line. So copper line, it's a bit different. We talked about the undulating action of lead core. Copper is more stable, okay? It will run a depth and it'll stay like that. And it's very, very stable, which is very, very good for towing things like a flasher, where you're talking about a whole lot of resistance and this whole action that will cause that line to lift and fall as the action is going. So copper is more stable and it's very good at keeping those things down to the depth that you want. So usually, for me, I'm running a 200 copper, which is a little bit deeper than a 10 color lead core, and then incrementally 50 feet for each reel to go out to as much as 400. I don't go into the 500s, but 400 is enough for me. And that's, for me, 400. If you're trolling slow with cut bait, for me it's about 85 feet down, generally.
Same thing, you clip backing on the board and not the copper.
Yeah, yes, it's in the backing always, always. Never on the copper itself. Yeah, it's too thick anyway to put it in a release clip. But yeah, you're right. Another part to that as well. So for me, I like to run a little bit length to the from that backing knot, maybe another 15 feet, then the board. And the reason for that is sometimes, you know, if you have floating debris on the surface, that it'll slide down the line, but it'll stop at that backing knot. All right, so it's not going to slide all the way down the copper, down to whatever, right, and make a mess of things. So that backing knot will end up becoming a, you know, a stop to a lot of stuff going down the line.
Good points. Couple of things for me for lead core. So I'm typically, my lead core is similar to Shane. I'm probably not running anything bigger than a 5 color core. I don't really run 10 color cores. I'm probably running my 200 copper if that's the case. But in the spring, super effective. I'll have a 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors of core. And in the spring, when you're running that 30, 40 feet of water, those cores could be super effective. We're usually running, you know, depending on how many people we get in the boat, if we can run an extra rod, we're running 1 on each board and 1 down the chute. Something to keep in mind though, like Shane said, is on your turns, because you turn, that inside core is going to drop, the outside core is going to come up, and if you're making a sharp turn, zebra mussels and core don't go along together too well. And I've lost my share of core because I've dragged it on the bottom. So just be really mindful of some of your turns if you've got like a 3 or 4 color out and you need in 25, 30 feet of water. And as far as coppers go, one thing just to be mindful of is when you're deploying really big coppers, your 300s, your 400s, and you also got deep divers. So a lot of people ask, you know, how do you get them over top of your divers? And one of the common mistakes made is when you deploy your copper, you free spool it. Let's say you got a 250 or 300 diver out, and you free spool that copper out the back, attach it to your board, and let it go up the side. Well, you haven't let that copper come up and settle where it should be yet, so it's probably a lot deeper. It's going to drop, and then when you cross your diver rod, it's going to catch it. And you'll only do that once or twice, and you won't do it again because it creates quite the mess. So just be very mindful of that.
You prefer copper over steel?
Personally, I haven't got into the weighted steel yet, but
I found with the copper you get more kinks. Where the weighted
100%
steel goes on the
way
reel a
more
lot
user
easier.
friendly. Yeah, I spooled up some here, and it's just something I haven't got into yet.
I
but
got
it
in,
is
I switched from copper to
Yeah.
the
A lot
torpedo
of people
weighted
have,
steel,
yeah.
and it's made a big difference. Even like you said, when you're letting it out, you just, I usually put my clicker on and let it take itself out, settle itself, and then I'll let it take over from
Yeah.
there. And I found I get a lot less kinks and a lot less sets
Yeah.
from it too. And 9 times out of 10 you're getting a bite as it's going out.
Yeah.
Where the copper, you couldn't really tell. So or at
Product's
least
only
I
really
could.
been out for a couple of years, maybe 3 years, the weighted steel.
The weighted
Yeah,
steel,
yeah. When it
But,
first came out, it's basically an
I know a lot of guys that run it seem to really get good reviews.
It's
They
just a
like it.
lot easier and a lot less kinks, I found.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's good benefits to it for sure. I'm not sure that, you know, 400 weighted steel will reach the same as copper 400. 45 pound
There's
test.
a 10 foot on 100 difference.
Yeah,
So 100 feet out, instead of 40 feet, it'd be 30 feet, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I don't know the
Yeah.
exact number, I think it's like 27, 37, or
Mhm.
37, 47, something like
But
that.
a lot of guys are just running snap weights on their, they'll run 200
Yeah.
feet and then just add snap weights.
Yeah, that's
to get
all
to
I
the
usually
desired
do
depth.
too.
Yeah.
I get it down that extra little bit, I'll throw 2 or 3 ounce snap weight and let it go down and go from there.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, now we've talked a lot about, you know, all the different setups, right? Downriggers, divers, we talked about lead core and copper. You're probably thinking, well, that's a lot of gear, right? Like, that's a lot of stuff to manage, and it's true, it is. Rod management on the boat is probably one of the most difficult things to learn, and it takes time. Darryl gave you a tip about how to deploy copper and just be patient. It sure is. But it's so true with all these things that you're going to deploy. You're wanting to be thinking about everything that you're putting in the water as a three-dimensional understanding of where they're going to settle, okay? And where they are while you're letting them out. So, you know, we're talking about how steep things are. Generally, at the back of the boat with your downriggers, it's straight down, right? Well, generally. So you got these lines that are there, then your divers, a little bit more on a steeper angle, then your boards out, kind of like that V pattern, right? So that V pattern is really important. But keeping the thought of that while you're deploying lines will allow it to slide over top of something that's deeper and closer to the boat without colliding. Same with double divers. You know, you're going to be doing the same thing. Generally, you're going to set your first diver, and then usually it's the outside diver on a 3 setting, and then you set your other one inside it so that it doesn't collide while you're letting it out.
Do you run yours the same length out, like 150 feet each, or?
Not necessarily.
No?
So double divers often, so generally, you know, if I'm targeting a particular depth, so true with walleye. You know, my inside diver on a 1.5 may only be 90 out, and then my outside diver on a 3 will be like 130, right, or 140, just to get the same kind of depth. But it's kicked out like this, and the other one is like this, but running the same depth as you're trolling. So that's kind of you know, the way that you can focus on a particular depth, especially for walleye. That's a big deal. But
Trying it out on the shoreline here too.
yeah.
And I'm just wondering if you run them same depth, like same length out, if it makes a difference, or you should mix it up.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't hurt to mix it up, right?
Right.
Just to get an idea of what you're after. The good thing about salmon fishing, especially, is that the salmon they feed up and down, right? Like it's. I know we talk about them making long runs, but they will come up for a bait, or they will feed, you know, 30 feet higher than they were 5 minutes ago, and they move a lot in the water column up and down. So it's significant how you know, how depth could be different. You know, you could catch them 60 feet down on one setup and 120 on the other, right? Like it's completely wide open, I would say, especially for Chinook salmon. Yeah. Yep.
In your V pattern that you described,
Mhm.
where would you run your 10 color lead core?
Generally on the outsides. Generally on the outside. So usually with lead cores and coppers for salmon, it's no more than 2 boards on one side for me. I know some will run more boards, but generally I don't run a whole lot more than 2. And if I really wanted to, it'll only be 1. So we use inline planer boards. Bigger ones like this will be for your coppers, or even 10 color lead core. If you're trolling a little bit quicker, you'll need something a little bit larger like this. That'll get it out to the side, right? And it doesn't hurt if you're, you know, wanting to minimize the number of rods. You can run it off the back, out the chute they call it, with your 10 color lead core, and just sit it in a rod holder and just watch it. And it does catch a lot of fish in that, you know, way back there behind the boat. But generally, while you're, you know, busy with other things and you catch fish on other things, it'll get caught up in it. So sending it out on the board sometimes is a little bit easier for your rod management. Yeah.
Darryl said his lead core 1 to 5. Do you have a favorite amount? Which one catches more fish between 1 to 5?
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say I do, no. It just all depends where those fish are in the water column, right? Like I said, this is usually when I'm fishing that inside 50 feet of water that I'm running those cores. I mean, we might run one for some coves when we're out off the drop. Put a 2 color or 3 color out on a board. I'm not really looking for kings. If it is, it's kind of incidental. I'm looking for coves, but Yeah, if you're just starting out in the spring, I'd probably go with a 3-color. You can run a stick on a 3-color, it's gonna get you down about 18 feet. You know, 15 to 18, so.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good number, but yeah, it's kind of, you wanna kind of have them all, so you got the whole arsenal, you know.
Yeah.
Do they sell 135s or do you just chop up a 10?
Yeah, I just buy it in bulk,
Oh,
and then, yeah.
Yeah. If you have
Or
two,
if you come in the store, they'll spool up whatever you want,
yeah.
put the backing on for you too.
Yeah, they'll have the numbers so that they know how much backing line you'll need for, let's say, a 2-color lead core. If you're doing it at home with a large spool and wanted to do your own increments, have 2 reels that are the same size and do it in reverse, right? Put your lead core on the bottom and put the backing on it, and then reverse it onto the reel, and then you have it at full capacity.
What reels do you guys run?
I'm all Okumas, you're Shimano, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Pretty much all old style colors, or Dakotas, or. Just another point to Shane about rod management. And I know probably a lot of you go with a buddy, there's 2 of you on the boat, that's probably most common for wreck anglers. One guy runs his side of the boat, the other guy runs his other side of the boat, you know, you run a rigger and a diver, or a rigger and a board, or whatever. But when we tournament fish, we're always mindful of what everybody's running. You really want the whole boat, like Shane talked about that beat pattern, you want it to run together in unison. So, you know, I'm not gonna be running my diver at 150 and he's running his one diver at 150. Or both our riggers are at the same depth, right? You wanna spread those things out. We never run our riggers, our riggers are always 10 feet apart, minimum. And even if the one rigger, your rigger's getting bit, I'm not gonna lower that other one to interfere with that, because sometimes I feel like that might shut that down. That said, if that rigger fires, you know, your 100-foot deep rigger, bang, the other one goes down immediately, because there could be a school of fish there, chances are you might double up. But again, just, you know, even if you and your buddy are you're running your side, he's running his side, just be mindful of where each other is in the water column. So you can kind of spread that out and cover all your depths so that you can catch on to things, you know. When something's successful, then you can repeat it.
Yeah, very good point, very good point. The other part to it as well, you'll find when you're watching your graph, having 2 riggers, okay, and the lines are going across your graph like this, and you'll see fish going on the one and then move down to the other. You know where that fish is going, right? And it really helps to try to focus in on what bait to run, you know, what bait is getting looked at, what's pulling fish in. So again, like, you know, we talked about a spread, right? All these rods that we've just put out, all of these rods have attracting qualities and triggering qualities to getting bites. They're not all equal, right? So you may have baits that pull fish into a spread, but it may not actually get bit. It might be something else that gets bit, right? So you're trying to figure this all out together, you know. Again, like you said, if you're running one side of the boat against the other side of the boat, you're defeating yourself. You're almost cutting your productivity in half. Use the entire boat, the whole spread, to your advantage. It's like running a football team. You have your offensive line and only going to use half of your offensive line, right? This is not going to work, right? So the same kind of thing where, you know, you're going to run your whole spread where it's going to work together to be able to catch fish. We often use the idea of almost like a parade, right? As you're parading your baits through, you want to bring the attention to them right under the boat, get them interested, get them thinking about feeding, and then all the baits that follow behind it is these things that are second option, okay, third option, fourth option. And you try to suck in the fish and catch them on the way out. So, you know, often that means, you know, sometimes it's a higher rigger than what they're living in. You'll see them, they'll come in, it's on a short lead, getting their attention to come up, and then they'll disband. And then your second rigger is a little bit deeper, maybe a little bit further back. And then your divers, and then your lead cores, and your coppers, right? So you got that whole paraded action to be able you know, get these fish to bite somewhere along the way. Yeah. Good talk on that. When it comes to size of boat, we talked at the beginning that we both started in smaller size boats, and you know, you certainly have lots of time on bigger boats. I've had plenty of time as well on bigger boats, but I still operate a small boat, and there's advantages and disadvantages I find for either or. Now you can imagine, you know, a big boat certainly has the advantage in rough conditions. Being comfortable in choppy conditions is the advantage. But there's also other advantages too of the big boat, I find. So for an example, you have much more space, right? You have more space in the back of the boat to be able to maneuver and get, you know, rods moved around, but also anglers that are fighting fish, you know, move them over to one side while the guy's netting the fish on the other, or whatever it might be. Small boats, we have advantages as well. And one of the biggest advantages I find is that we have the opportunity to trailer our boats to the port that is best. A big boat has to spend a lot of gas money in order to get to productive water sometimes throughout the season. If you're stuck on a dock and the fishing is 12 miles down the lake, you're going to be burning a lot of fuel. Right. So a trailerable boat is certainly helpful for that. You go down to that port and launch and then get onto those fish in a short period of time. You're going to be watching your weather, of course, the windows of opportunity with a smaller boat, but you can certainly focus in on where the fishing's best. Just because you have a ramp pass to some place doesn't mean you're anchored and needing to go to that ramp each and every time you deploy or you launch your boat. All right, you have that mindset, then you're already putting yourself at a disadvantage to catching fish. So be mobile. Yeah, I know lots of folks, you know,